Tonight, thank you. Welcome to our message number 2, simply because we tape only the message now and so on. Message number 2 about what? Message number 2 about the purposes of the local church. Okay? I think that most of you were with us last week and so on. And I sure hope that you would remember a statement made last week, as it was the first message about the purposes of the local church. I just need to bring you up to speak, maybe Matthew, that in the first year in this church here, we studied the doctrine of the church. What is the church, to get grounded and perhaps to make a choice. Yes, I go, or no, I don't go. It's rare that we are given the opportunity to do so. Basically, what we're going through together, it's as if I would do a Thursday night with tables and chairs, with a lecture type that most of you here know because they come to class. But the Spirit led me to do a study like this, but at the same time to be like this. Not only to gather head knowledge and carry on, and I decided to do it in the church capacity. I made a statement last week. If God has a program for the Gentile salvation, and He does, and for the universal church, and He does have a program, it has to be connected with His program for the Jewish people. It's a statement I've made last week. If God went out and decided to save Gentiles, to take a people for His own name, it has to be connected with the program of the Jewish people. Last week I asked you to turn in Deuteronomy chapter 32 verses 8 and 9. Deuteronomy chapter 32 verses 8 and 9. And I explained to you that God created the borders of all the land, all the earth. Dutch border. When you go to Europe and France and Brussels, these are small countries, and then you reach the border. Canada, you go to Peachard, or you take the water here by the Coho, and you pass the border on the water. All of these things are established based upon the number of Jews that are to be found on the planet. And if there would be people on Mars, there would be Jews on Mars, because they have to be found all over the place. And God has a program for them. And tonight we'll look at the second purpose of the why people are saving Gentiles, and one of the purposes as to why we have the existing of the universal church and so on. Mr. Paul, that you know from the New Testament, was the one who established Gentile evangelism. Last week I did with you a small survey of the book of Acts, and then Paul is saved in Acts chapter 9, and then in Acts chapter 12 and so on, he goes on his first missionary journey. And then you have 3 or 4 missionary journeys that he took. The only thing that I want you to retain tonight, it's Paul establishing Gentile salvation and Gentile evangelism. And he is the head representative, Paul, of what we call the dispensation of grace. He's the chief person of the age of grace. The chief person under the Mosaic law was Moses. And the chief person under the dispensation of grace is Paul. That's why he's laying the foundation and so on. The Gentiles are part of the church, and one of the purpose of the universal church was last week to call among the Gentiles a people for His name. It was last week's message based upon Acts chapter 15. I repeat the purpose. It was to choose to take from among the Gentile a people for His name. So the reason God wanted to call out from among the Gentiles a people to glorify His name was to provoke the Jews to jealousy. That's the title of today's message. To provoke the Jews to jealousy. And this is our purpose number 2. So that's the title of our message today. To provoke the Jews to jealousy. So basically, the first purpose leads to the second. He chose among the Gentiles a people, you and I, to glorify His name, so that we may come alongside, that's the rest of the message, and provoke the Jews to jealousy. Of course, I'm talking about the godly jealousy. I'm talking about the divine jealousy. And that's why at this point I would like you to open in your Bible, in the passage that was read to you, Romans chapter 11, 11 to 15. Are you there? I think you are. In Romans chapter 11, 11 to 15. Let me give you just a little bit of background. Paul Romans. And from chapter 1 to 8, he talks about the three aspects of your personal salvation. It's an overview right now, soaring with a drone over the epistle. Okay? In chapter 1 to 8, he talks about the three aspects of our common salvation. First aspect, justification. Second aspect, sanctification. Third aspect, glorification. Then, in 9, 10, 11, he goes with the doctrine of the remnant, the doctrine of Israel, which Olga is part of the remnant, as well as another person in the crowd, I think. It's important to know. And he develops what we call Israelology of Paul, the doctrine of the Jewish people from Paul. Tonight might be a message that rarely you will hear in your local church and so on, but we need to establish this before we go around. So, I've sent you to Romans chapter 11, but 9, 10, and 11 are connected together. It's a segment of his book dealing if God forbade, not forbade, but if God forsook his people. So come with me in Romans 11, we read again, and now we go verse by verse to do the exposition. Okay? The purpose of Israel stumbling right now, because they stumble, and I will take my time to explain that to you. That's why there was only 2 songs tonight. All right? And keep in mind one thing. It's that this is a unit here talking about Israel and so on. Come with me. 11a. I say then, did they not? They did not stumble so as to fall, did they? The question can be rephrased this way. Did Israel fall irrevocably, never to fall, never to rise again? Because they fall, you know that, by rejecting the Messiah. These guys are standing in unbelief. So have they, as a nation, fall irrevocably in order not to rise again? Paul gives the answer to that here. May it never be. Okay? May it never be. Circle that if you circle your Bible. In Greek, this is the strongest negative statement that you can find. It means perish the thought. God did not abandon his people. That's what it means. Perish the thought. Anathema to think that way. God did not forsake his people. Okay? God planned for Israel to stumble over the rock, over Christ. Why? For the purpose of Gentile salvation. Ouch. Okay? God planned for Israel as a nation, I'm not talking about the remnant here, to stumble so that the gospel may go out to the Gentile people. So, when we establish a church, we need to understand kindly together that Gentile salvation is subservient or subordinate to Jewish salvation. We owe them our salvation. It's very important to understand to have a solid foundation based upon what we need to be based upon. You're on cement here. You're on solid ground. But theologically, we need to be on solid ground as well. I repeat, God planned for Israel. He was not caught up by surprise when the nation of Israel rejected their Messiah. There is always a remnant. We understand that together. But they stumbled so that the salvation may come out to the Gentiles. So we're going to be talking about that later in a moment of time. 11b and verse 14, he says, but by their transgression salvation has come to the Gentiles to make them jealous. The them is the Jews. Scroll down to 14 for a moment. If somehow I might move to jealousy, circle move to jealousy, my fellow countrymen, and save some of them. The Greek word to provoke to jealousy is 2 words combined together. It goes like this. You don't need to know that. If you know it, I will spell it for you. The word provoking to a jealousy, it's a combination of 2 Greek words. Para, P-A-R-A, zileo. Z-E-I, parazileo, L-A-O, Z-E-I-L-A-O. It means basically the para, it means to come alongside. I came alongside Olga years ago. You come alongside. Start to talk with them. And zileo, is from the word that we know, zeal. It means to cause to burn, to seethe, to fire something, to start a fire, or to make red hot. Positively, we are asked to provoke the Jews to jealousy, beloved, not to cause them to anger. Basically, I will explain in a moment what is provoking them to jealousy. And if we want to be able one day to provoke a Jewish person to jealousy, we need to know what we talk about in the Bible. So you come alongside and you share your faith with them, but it's mainly things that belongs to them. Don't lose your place here. Go to 9:4. You listening, Olga?
Yes.
Okay, go to 9:4, chapter 9, verse 4, the same book. And that's how I got my wife. I don't want only the focus to be exclusively on her, but she was in Orthodox Judaism. She was like this, going to the synagogue and so on. So we speak now. We do a scenario together. Are you with me? Do I have you? Who are Israelites, to whom belong the adoptions as sons, and the glory, it's a meaning the Shekinah glory, and the covenants, the giving of the law, and the temple services, and the promises, plural, the two comings, first and second coming. Whose are the fathers? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were Jewish people. And from whom is the Messiah? The Christ was the Jewish man, the God-man, according to the flesh, who is over all, God blessed forever. When you understand these things and you share that with him or with her, you say, I know your covenants. Yeah. The Davidic covenant, the land covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, the Davidic covenant. You don't need to do all these things. And I am so happy that a Gentile like me was grafted in contrary to nature, and I have become a partaker in all these things. By the way, do you know that the Messiah was of your nationality? I did the same thing with Olga. I said, do you know that Jesus that I worship, if I cut his wrist here, it will come blood, and he has the same blood as a nation that you have running in your vein. That's provoking to jealousy. I believe as being Ani Mashiach. Ani Mashiach means in Hebrew, my Messiah. And this is through you that we have a Messiah. And now the person starts to be positively off. Because how come he speaks that language? And I should be the one doing all that kind of stuff. That's how you provoke them to jealousy. You share your faith with them, you walk a good walk, and then it opens up. And you call him by the name, Yeshua. I belong to a congregation, because they don't like the word church, because the ancestors have suffered a lot under certain segments of the church. When you speak that language, that's why God chose from among the Gentiles a people for his name, first reason or first purpose, leading to the second one, to provoke the Jews to jealousy. I know you're on your seat right now and you say, am I going to have to be asked to do that one day? Wait, I'm not there yet. Okay? 16 to 21. Come with me, Rob. 16 to 21. Same chapter. 16 to 21 of the chapter 9. So then it does not depend on the man who wills or the man who runs, but on God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this purpose, no, it's not the 16 to 21 that I wanted. No, sorry, led you astray. Go to 11, 16 to 21. My mistake. Go to 11, or go back to our chapter now, 11. 16 to 21. If the first piece of dough is holy, the lump is also. And if the root is holy, the branches are too. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive, were grafted among them and became partaker, it's keyword, circle that, with them, the Jews, of the rich root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches, but if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, look at the beauty, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in? You bet, quite right. They were broken off because of their unbelief, but you stand by your faith. Do not be conceited, but fear. I go back to my thing about sharing the gospel to a Jew. And you say to Olga, hey, you own the olive tree. You are the owner of the olive tree. And me, I'm a Gentile, and I have been grafted in contrary to nature. Are you part of the people that have been broken off? Or you would like to become a Messianic Jew? It's very complicated. But that's how we provoke the Jewish people to jealousy. By the scriptures and taking our stand to what belongs to us. Not to become replacement theologians who claim to have everything. We need to be content with the place that we have. That's the parazileo. You come up to them and you love them. And if you have an opportunity, you share your faith with them. Because it is directly a reason for the local church. Verse 12 of chapter 11. Listen to that closely. Now, if their transgression, what is their transgression? Not to have believed on the Messiah. Because they established their own righteousness by this, with the tzitziot, with this here, and with the phylacteries here. So where was I? 12. Now if their transgression is riches for the world, and their failure is riches for Francois, how much more will their fulfillment be? Here, he does a contrast. It's theological, but I will try to explain it easily. It's a contrast between the partial of verse 5. Here, when he says, in some way then, there has also be at the present time a remnant according to God's gracious choice. So, there is only a remnant being found right now. Only a remnant is found right now. So that's the contrast between the partial, that only a remnant believes today, not the whole nation, and it's contrasted with the fullness of verse 12, when you have with their fulfillment be or their fullness. In the future, there will be the national salvation of Israel and their complete restoration to Israel, their land. That's the contrast here. I read again. Now, if their transgression is riches for the world and their failure is riches for the Gentiles, so basically only a remnant of the nation is saved right now. It's the partial. So how much more? That's the Calvahomer. From the lesser to the greater, from the lesser to the greater, how much more will their fullness be when the day that they will be completely saved, and so on. In verse 13 and 14, but I am speaking to you who are Gentiles, inasmuch then as I am an apostle of Gentiles, I magnify my ministry. If somehow I might move to jealousy, parazileo, my fellow countrymen, and save some of them. If there is one person that understands the methodology of God, it's Paul. And that's his word. And think about Paul. Paul was an Hasidim like this. He was an Orthodox Jew, Pharisee of Pharisee, very zealous for the Lord. And he has been asked to become the apostle of the Gentiles. And that's why his words have to be taken seriously, specifically in establishing a church. These messages, I know, I look at you, perhaps are difficult to understand. Rely not on me. Rely on the Spirit to ask you, is my local church right now based on solid ground? What am I learning there? Is that from God or not? He will tell you. Okay? He was called as an apostle to the Gentiles, and we need to keep it seriously. So what is the lesson here? Make a note. Did Israel fall irrevocably? No. They will rise again one day. They stumbled. Yes. And because they stumbled, we have been found, have you? Because they stumbled over the rock, we have been found. That's the plan. That's the lesson to understand. Gentile salvation? Yes. Why, Francois? To provoke them to jealousy. Now, I give you a phrase, perhaps to note, I'll say it twice. Paul understood that the more Gentiles Paul lead to the Lord, means more Jews will be provoked to jealousy, and therefore more Jews will come to faith as well as Gentiles. And believe you me, When a Jewish person becomes a believer, specifically the male that have the gift of teaching, they are on fire. It makes beautiful evangelists. So Paul, why does he say, I magnify my ministry? It seems a bit boastful. But he knows that he would have loved to be in Jerusalem with his friend. And remember Acts. Always to the Jews first when he was going on a missionary journey. Yet he was chosen to be the apostle of the Gentiles. And he said, I magnify my ministry. Why? Because the more gents he leads to Christ, it means that the more Jews will be provoked to jealousy. It's a wheel, a logical wheel, a logical methodology put together by God. It's good logic. Look at verse 25c for a moment of verse 11 of chapter 11, 25c. And now you should ask me the question you won't. How long will it last, François? Because we're still in the middle of it. It will last week until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. When the last Gentile will enter into the body, bang, rapture. It will last until the fullness of the Gentiles. What's the word fullness, Christophe, last week? A set number. I don't need to know the number. It's impossible to know it. Let God be God. It's okay. He knows it. So us Gentiles, we provoke the Jews to jealousy. Beautiful. That's one of the purpose of the universal church. That is one of the purpose also of Gentile salvation. Verse 15. Come in verse 15 of chapter 11. For if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? The unbelief of Israel was directed towards the restoration of faith. The unbelief of Israel was directed towards the restoration of faith. Because what they pursue by their own ability, we Gentiles have achieved it by faith. Amen. You cannot dress sharp like this and please God. And they look sharper than me. And they pray at the wall like this. You know what they do. You have seen that. And they kiss the wall and they put papers or prayers in the wall and so on. Are they heard? Do they sustain a relationship with God? I need to be honest with you. They don't. Because nobody can come to God but through Christ. And me, I never pursued the law. I never tried to keep the law ever in my life. I didn't know 25 years ago that there was a Mosaic law. And I attained it by faith. So their unbelief basically was directed towards the restoration of faith. And it will happen to them one day. Not all of them, but the people of the Jews I'm talking. The fall now. We take the fall now. The fall of Israel was directed towards reclamation. The fall of Israel was directed towards reclamation. Verses 23 and 24 of the verse 11. But if they do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut out from what is by nature a wild olive tree, and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more? Calva-Homer argument. Will these who are natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? It's going to happen. Who will say, come and let us return to the Lord, Beruch haba b'shem Adonai? It's not the Gentiles that will say it. The Jewish people. It's the Jewish people that will say it one day. It goes like this. I read the verse 15 again because it's too important. Come back with me. Thank you for your patience. For if their rejection, the Jewish rejection, is the reconciliation of the world through Christ, of course, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? It goes like this. If by the fall of Israel, Gentiles, us, receive the gospel, how much more will the Gentile, us, be blessed by Israel's return to him? When they will say, come and let's return to the Lord in Hosea chapter 6 verse 1. That's the argument from the lesser to the greater. I repeat. If we have received that much Gentile by their unbelief, by the fall of Israel, we have received the gospel, which is, I don't have any cash on me, which is already quite a bit of a wealth. Beloved, you're sitting down there spiritually exceedingly rich. Did you know that? Say amen to that, please. Amen. Okay? I'm not talking about the bank account here. How much more we will be blessed when they, the Jews, ask him to come back. And I said pause, because I'm going to explain to you a few things in a sketch manner. When I get excited like this, I don't like it, but at the same time I do. If we have received this much blessing due to their stumbling, just think of how much more Calvary blessings we will receive when Israel is saved. What will happen when they will be saved, Kelsey? Christ will come back. And he will establish the Messianic kingdom. Brandon, don't answer the question. Did you know that you will see him, capital H, face to face? Don't answer. Did you know that? You will see him face to face. Right now you're listening to a French Canadian with a thick accent for 40 minutes. There is something more to come than that, beloved. Do you know that for 1,000 years he will establish the Messianic kingdom? Do you know that there will be a marriage feast? Errol, you will be able to sit beside Abraham.
That's right.
I did not smoke anything, I promise. I am sober. If we have received that much, by their stumbling, if we have been made that wealthy by their stumbling, wait. There is more blessing to come. You will live for 1,000 years in a reign of righteousness, holiness, peace, security, joy, gladness, with a new body, no tears, no pain, no addiction, no discouragement, and finally, no election. Because it will be an absolute monarchy. I repeat, verse 15. Now you understand verse 15. Because if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? You will be resurrected and them too. It's the Calva-Homer argument, how much more? From the lesser. Right now, you're sitting there, you're wealthy, but that's the lesser. There is something way greater than that is awaiting us, Louis. Face to face, the Shekinah glory. You will see that it's going to serve as a wall of protection. We cannot allegorize these things. Now what? As a conclusion to the message. What do you think when you hear the word debt? Okay, if I say to you, let's talk about debt, automatically in your mind it's negative. Because we, preachers or Bible expositors, we teach the people sometimes when we do the Spiritual Life series to try to get out of debt because it owns you and you cannot give a proper worship. Debt negatively. Okay? That's why I can do that ministry by faith alone. It's just a personal thing that I give to you. Don't hold it against me. I'm debt-free. Olga and I are debt-free. Don't own a house, humble apartment, but we're debt-free. So when I sleep at night, if I don't sleep, it's because I ate too much pizza. It's not about what I owe. Okay? But there is a spiritual or biblical indebtedness. Every single time, every single time that a Gentile comes to Christ, he is in debt. Divine debt. Biblical debt. And Paul, fortunately, explained how to pay that off. He explains this. And it applies to both. If you don't mind, go to Romans chapter 15 right now. That's where he explains that. 15:25. Like I said to you, it's not a message that you will hear tomorrow in a regular meeting. Every single time that a Gentile comes to faith, he is in spiritual indebtedness. And thanks God that basically Paul explained to us how to pay that here in chapter 15, verses 25 to 27. But now I'm going to Jerusalem serving the saints. For Macedonia and Achaia have been pleased to make Macedonia is Gentiles, Achaia is Gentiles, have been pleased to make a contribution for the poor among the saints of Jerusalem. Yes, they were pleased to do so, and they are indebted. They are indebted to them. Circle the them. Who are they? That's the Jews. Because if the Gentiles have shared in their spiritual things, they are indebted to minister to them also in material things. Wouch! Wouch! It applies to both, individually or corporately. When a local church with this one starts, and we are, I think, already started, or any other church here, they need to lay out in their mission plan, our computer, the pie. When you have the pie in green or pink or white or blue, occupy pie on your computer, there is part of the pie that needs to go to Jewish mission. That's how you pay your debt. Since we have received that much spiritually, we are asked to minister to them physically. So when you sit on the board, the elders and so on, you need to go and say, okay, we are indebted to them, that's the Jews. And we need to provide for them also. Since we have become partakers of Jewish spiritual blessings, therefore we have the responsibility to share with Jewish ministries materially. That's the DIBC, that's what we do. It's already started. Okay? I'm giving you something that should be sometimes in the bulletin. I receive donations. And part of it goes to, you can make a note, campsoshana.com or .org. Camp Shoshana is in the Adirondacks in New York City, in New York State. And that's a Jewish ministry that are specifically organized to evangelize the Jews. Because you will say, François, good message. I hope you will say that. But how can I go out? We don't have much Jews in Duncan. It doesn't matter at all. And that's why I decided to, between me and God, to support Camp Shoshana. TSM is one that can be supported by other local churches because we preach the scriptures from a Jewish perspective, which is good. But TSM has, specifically in the DIBC, we need to make our things right. We are in debt, and that's the first part of the pie of donation. It doesn't mean not to support another organization. First, you need to pay your debt. For the rest of your existence, until the end comes for the church and so on. It's very, very important. It's www.campsoshana.com. Just Google it. It's very transparent. We send an amount of money, a little bit more than $200 a month. Not much, but better than none. Our responsibility here corporately to go to the Jews first, like Paul constantly did in the Acts, is fulfilled here. It's fulfilled here. I cannot go to the synagogue, although I would like to organize soon next year or the following year, I would like to contact the rabbi and take you to a synagogue service. There. Just to observe and have fun and be invited as guests to go to the synagogue. Would you come as a group with me and meet the rabbi and say, we come and worship with you today and intercede for them? I would love it. I did that when I was at Cape Henry Harbor. But here at Duncan Independent Bible Church here, it's in order. We have this one in order to gather. we go to the Jews first, just for a small part of the pie. That doesn't mean not to bless Warren Land with cookies and muffins and a donation sometimes and so on. I wanted to start on the proper foundation to pay off my debt and look after yours also. It's not a request for money here. It's just to have, Francois, played to have the proper foundation to be blessed based upon Genesis chapter 12 verse 3. I will bless those that bless you. To ignore these things, once taught, it's to be arrogant towards the branches. I repeat, to ignore these things, once they have been taught to us, it's to be arrogant towards the branches. 11:18 of Romans. 11:18. Don't be arrogant towards the branches, but if you are arrogant, remember that this is not you who supports the root, but the root support you. And the olive tree is rooted in the Jewish covenants. And specifically being amillennialist, it's being extremely arrogant towards the branches. And you might think that they're blessed, but I'm sorry to tell you they're not. That's why here in this one, as we do it, and it's not difficult to do, we need to start it proper. We're laying down a foundation. No, we're not laying down a foundation. We're building upon a foundation already laid. And that's what I mean by independent. To look at the scriptures and to get organized in the proper way. The rest will come by itself. These messages are extremely important. And this was basically my conclusion to the message. To start on the right track. And beloved, I'm not going to ask you if you have heard a message on this passage in the last 20 years. You have not. You have not. And I'm very sorry about that. Olga? Would you, do we stand? Why don't we stand? It's a short one, only one.